Welcome to Team Building Cultures, the podcast designed to deliver tools and tips for improving team communication, collaboration, and fostering a culture where teams thrive. Now, here's your host, Beverly Hathorn, owner of Strategic HR Consultants.
Hello, listeners, and thank you for joining me for yet another episode of Team Building Cultures, where we believe the culture is the soil in which all things grow. Today, I'm very excited to speak with Becky Mollenkamp. Becky Mollenkamp is an accountability coach for feminist founders who want to go after big goals without burning out. We all know how easy it is to just burn yourself down when you're really all gas and no brakes, and that's what we all want. We want to go after big goals, but she's going to talk to us about doing that without just tearing yourself down. And today we're going to learn about compassionate team coaching to improve company culture. So thank you so much for joining me today, Becky. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited for our talk.
Yeah. Let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So tell us about compassionate team coaching. What does that indicate to us?
I think the most important part of compassion is that empathy piece of being able to understand the individuals in that team and speaking to them the way they show up in the world. I think that all of us, through no fault of our own, it's just how humans are, we're very individual, and we see the world the way we see the world, and we don't always consciously realize that other people are seeing the world differently. Like, I think we intellectually understand we're all unique and all of that, but still we sort of have this assumption that everyone sort of shows up the way we do. Everyone's seeing the same thing I'm seeing it. They're experiencing the same way I'm experiencing it. And we forget that each of us is so unique, and the lens that we're looking at the world through is completely different. We can be in the exact same conversation and be seeing it two completely different ways. And compassionate coaching is about being able to say, how can I become more conscious of the fact that that other person sees the world in a different way than I do? And it doesn't make their way wrong and my way right, or my way wrong and their way right. It just means that we are two different individuals who have different life experiences, different personalities, different capacity considerations, different things that make us show up uniquely in the world. And so getting compassionate about your team coaching is saying, how do I look at each member of this team as an individual and help them in the way they need to be helped? And then how do I help the team members see each other as individuals and learn to interact with each other in that same compassionate way?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, particularly where you talk about the team members, how they view each other, because preferences and priorities differ, and we need to be aware of those. And the more aware we are and knowledgeable of our team and the various personalities, as you said, that has an impact. So tell me, what are some of the common sources of tension inside teams? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's spent much time on a team realizes it can be a million things, right? There's anything and everything that causes us tension with other people. But I think it boils down to really one thing, which is communication. But it can be sort of two things. One is that lack of empathy, that not seeing that someone else's experience is simply different than mine. It's, again, not right or wrong, but it's different. Not being able to step outside of our own shoes and put ourselves into someone else's shoes, and being able to see the complexity of a situation. So I think that's a big part of it. But really, and related to that, it's communication. Almost always it is fears around confrontation and conflict, things that we are often societally, culturally, and within our families taught about conflict or about difficult conversations that cause people to show up either in that, it's often a fight, flight, freeze response to those things. So some people might be the fighters, the ones that are going to take that head on, maybe even too aggressively. And then you might have people on your team who are like the people who are freeze and they get paralyzed in those moments, don't know how to have that conversation, or the ones who flee, which is they won't even engage. They they withdraw, they leave, they'll either quit the team or they will sort of ice someone out and ghost people. They won't communicate. So there's these differences in the ways that we communicate. And often that's what causes the most conflict, because whatever the tension is, whatever our disagreements are, if we can communicate through them and learn how to understand the other person's experience and then learn how to communicate in a way that's healthy, we can get through them. So the sources of the tension aren't as important as the fact that many folks haven't learned how to manage that tension. They haven't learned how to communicate, how to express what they need, how to express when they're feeling frustrated or upset, when they are feeling unseen or unheard. So I think more than anything, it boils down to, and this is true in almost all human relationships, it boils down to communication.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I feel that the organization's culture is so important. We need to make sure that we're providing a culture of psychological safety, autonomy, flexibility, where people feel free to express their perspectives in the way that is most common or available for them, that we can. Now, that doesn't mean that some of us get to run around and scream and yell while others get to, sit in the corner and, twiddle away or something, but we need to establish a successful route for communication, because if a message is sent and it wasn't received on the other end, it's just noise. So we need to make sure that, our communication tactics and methods are effective. Totally agree with you on that. And, some people, just based on their lives to this point, there's a new term now that triggered. There wasn't that term some years ago, but now, you can trigger people. You can trigger past pains and past experiences with the way that you communicate. So
Yeah.
That's a new thing.
And I think that that's also part of that compassionate coaching, is being able to understand the role that trauma plays, because that's when we're getting triggered. It's a trauma. It's a wound that's inside of us that's getting activated, that's completely unrelated to what's happening in the moment, yet it feels like this real thing that's happening to us, right? And we're reacting not usually to what's even happening in the moment. We're reacting to all the things that came before that are feeling similar to that dynamic. And that's unfair in that situation, but so many of us do it. So many of us have unhealed trauma or trauma that we've even worked through, but still it can get activated in those moments. And that's where that compassionate piece comes in, is understanding that all of us are walking around with a full life of experiences, some great, some bad, and that we bring that to the table. We bring that into any moment, whether we think it's quote unquote valid or not. It is coming with us in those moments. And I think historically, when you say like that hasn't been a word, right? Because historically, I think that a lot of managers and folks, coaches and everyone has kind of come into it with this like, get over yourself, get over it, move on. This is how we show up here, right? Be professional. They're acting like everyone should just show up that way and have these expectations of how people are supposed to behave. And that has been really alienating. And the part that's really important to remember too, is that the people that's most alienating to are the people who have the most traumatic histories, the most traumatic experiences, which are typically non-white, non-men, right? We know that just from the data of who is having the most issues. So that has also been part of what perpetuates these environments where white men continue to rise in the ranks and be elevated, because we have fallen into this trap of like, this is what management's supposed to look like. This is what professionalism is supposed to look like. Completely devoid of compassion, completely devoid of empathy and care and concern. And so bringing that compassion into the space helps the team, because it helps the team learn to get along. It allows folks who have maybe historically been pushed to the margins and not been able to advance, be able to show up as their full selves, bring their own true life experience into the space, and be met with compassion so they can continue to rise in the ranks. And we know that companies that are led by women, by people of color, they are incredibly successful companies, right? They bring a different perspective, and companies that embrace the wholeness of what the human experience is are going to be the companies that best address customer needs, because our customers don't just look one way, right? They're able to, be more prosperous. And so even if you are a person who has this sort of historic mentality around like, oh, just get over yourself and show up, just buck up and be professional. Know that there's also a practical reason to employing more compassion in the way that you lead your teams, because you will be bringing along and elevating voices that have not always been there, but when they're in the room, it makes an actual financial difference for your company.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And I also find it interesting that as you speak about different people, personalities, their previous traumas and things that they've went through, that you have, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but the collage behind you, in my view, is significant because it is of different colors and it's like varied in its presentation, but it makes up a whole, and it makes up a whole picture. So we need all these different perspectives, experiences, people bringing their worth and their value, however it was obtained. We need that to make up a whole. I always say, a body can't be all arms. You couldn't walk. A body can't be all legs. You couldn't reach for things. So, we need all these various perspectives and experiences to make up a whole. And the point you just made about how that those people with those different experiences sometimes have stronger organizations and stronger companies. That's a really interesting statistic. I wasn't aware of that. Yeah,
women-owned companies specifically, I know, are more profitable than male-owned companies.
How about that?
Right? And that's just the truth of having more voices at the table. But we can't expect people to, like you, speaking to what you said about culture, we can't expect people to bring their voice to the table if they don't feel safe to do so, if they don't feel that psychological safety. And that safety comes through compassion, through listening, through believing others' lived experiences, through not dismissing those experiences, right? So I think that's all what's so important to me about that approach of bringing compassion to the table. And thanks for what you said about my painting, by the way, because I painted that. And someone asked me, somebody asked me what it meant, and I had no answer, but now I have a really beautiful answer for what it might mean. So thank you.
Yeah, that's what I read,
I love it.
All the different colors and things that take up to make up a whole. It takes all of that to make a whole. So yeah, that's a great painting back there. So tell me, why do you think team coaching is beneficial, and what makes your approach to team coaching different than maybe other approaches we are aware of?
Yeah, I think team coaching is so valuable for a lot of reasons. One, it is difficult to step outside of yourself. It's difficult for anyone to do that, where we just are immersed in our own lived experience, our own view on the world. And it's hard to step outside of that and be able to see someone else's experience, be able to garner their trust that you can truly be open-minded, especially when you have a team that's existing and has been working together. There's going to be all this historic stuff that you're bringing into that. And it can be hard to say, no, now I'm going to truly show up and coach and be different. And they're going to be coming to that manager saying like, are you though? Right? You have this history. And so it's hard for a manager to step outside of the history that's developed, outside of their own perspective. And so having an outside party who can come in and help lead those conversations, help bring attention to things that might be going on that are unsaid, that's really valuable, because it's something that can be very difficult to do on your own, because it's hard to develop that kind of trust, to create that kind of space. So a coach is going to be able to come in and help with that. It's going to create some of that safety that you've talked about, especially when, and any coach who I think is worth their salt is not going to be doing team coaching and reporting back to the managers what they learn. It should be wholly confidential. Anything that is said within that sphere, either with the team as a whole or individuals within the team talking to the coach. So when an employee knows that, when someone knows this is a space where I can really get honest, I can really share, I can be vulnerable, I can talk about the truth of what's happening here and not worry about retribution, because that's hard to do with a manager, to not have that fear. That really allows those team members to be able to get open and share things they might not otherwise have shared. And you can't really change things until you can put them on the table. Right? We can't change it if people are too afraid to discuss it. So when the team members feel that comfort to be able to open up, with a coach at an individual level, and then once the coach has that whole picture, to be able to come together as a team and without pointing fingers or anything else, be able to say, this is, the coach can then bring that outside perspective to say, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm hearing, this is what's happening in this space. Let's talk about that. Let's address it. That allows people to start to make significant change that is very hard to do on your own, especially again for those people who have the most trauma or the most difficulty with conflict, which conflict is and confrontation are not bad things, but for many people, they have learned that they are. And so they're not going to speak up. They're not going to talk about things. They won't get honest. They're going to let someone else, come in and take over the conversation. So having that outside party who can sort of play mediator, who can make sure all voices are heard in the conversation, that everything is actually being put out there, allow the manager to hear some truth that maybe they haven't heard. That's all incredibly valuable. And what do I do different? To me, it's that big piece that we've talked about around compassion, around understanding and honoring trauma, around understanding and honoring lived differences, the fact that we all have very different experiences coming into a space, understanding a lot of the systemic and historic issues around racism and sexism and ableism that come into a space unwittingly often, but are there, and being able to shine the light on those things, because that's incredibly important also for people to feel that kind of safety in a space. And I think, unfortunately, there are more and more coaches who are getting that education, doing that work, learning how to show up that way. But there are also a lot of coaches who are still very much in that historic, here's the one size fits all approach that everyone needs to follow, and who come in and talk about quote unquote professionalism without any understandings around historical context that plays into even a term like professionalism. And so I think it's really important, if you're the kind of business owner or manager who wants to really try to make a difference in, again, honoring the entirety of your team, or even if you don't yet have a very diverse team, truly striving to create a space that is welcoming and that actually feels like I hate to use the term safe space because there's a lot of issues around that, but a safer space for, anyone who is not fitting that mold of sort of the traditional white male employee, but somebody who has any sort of other difference. Then I think it's important to make sure you're investing in not just coaches, but everyone. So whoever you're bringing in, you're investing in people who are invested in addressing these issues and understanding these issues and making sure that that's integrated into their work. That's the same for HR. If you have an HR consultant, they darn well better understand all of these historic and complex issues that play into who's getting jobs and who's not, whose resume is going to be read a certain way and whose isn't. It's the same with financial consultants, with anyone. And certainly with coaches, if you're asking them to come in and create spaces for your team members to get vulnerable and get real, then it better be someone who is going to be able to speak to a wide range of people and check their judgments at the door and really show up to create that space that they feel like they can get open.
So very well said, Becky. I believe the main benefit that coaches bring is that they are a neutral party. So, and if they can elicit that safety among the group to help them understand that it's just us talking here. This is not, leadership's not present. I'm not going to, report back to them. Well, Bev feels this way and Becky feels this way. And, I'm not going to, this is just us talking so that we can work out whatever, is plaguing this group or this organization. So the neutrality of it all is very important. Also, what you say about diversity, I happen to believe, and I've written blogs on this, I happen to believe that diversity is a superpower. I really do believe that, because that's where you get the creativity, the innovation, because you're bringing in, again, all those different perspectives to provide the whole, to add to the whole piece. And so diversity is very important, and it's something that, if you want to be successful, should definitely be a part of your growth plan, your scaling, your hiring plan. You know, you need to include diversity, not just because the law says it, or because, but you know, it to help your business be successful and to find your future leaders in your company and to grow those leaders. You need to make sure that the diversity is present in all its colors and content. So totally with you on all of that. And I do like the compassionate coach. I like that phrase. I don't think that's ever been presented in that way. So compassion is something that we need to bring to the office space. Now, you know, that doesn't mean that we have to be, you know, we still got to be leaders, but you can bring that compassion because it's definitely necessary.
Yeah, and there's a difference between, I mean, I think sometimes people think leading, and I've seen this just in parenting as well, and I see it in the workplace, that we think demand is something that that respect is something that we demand, right? And that leadership looks like being the loudest person in the room or the quote unquote strongest person in the room, when in fact respect is earned, and that compassion goes a long way in getting that these quote unquote soft skills are actually really hard skills to develop. And there are some of the most important things that set apart leaders that people want to work for, leaders that have great success in having teams that show up and want to deliver for the company because they actually love being there, and those leaders who alienate their workers, who have high turnover, where people are not happy and are not giving their best. And so while it can sound soft, compassion, it really isn't. And it's actually very difficult. It's much easier to show up and just say my way or the highway. That's a lot easier, actually, than showing up to say, how do I really start to understand what drives you, what you care about, how you want to show up in the world, and speak to the individuals on my team in that really caring way.
Yes. And if you want to promote employee engagement, you need to figure out how to work with your people, how to get to know them, how to understand their perspectives and their priorities and their preferences, because the employee engagement really is the engine that powers this organization. Once you have nailed down your employee engagement and what makes your people happy and productive, and by the way, culture is a huge part of that. I mean, it has to do with benefits and pay and flexibility and all, but culture is what will really bring your employees to a point of happiness where they don't just come and feel that they're just a cog in the wheel, but they actually contribute and they bring their best. You can promote that with your culture. You can bring that employee engagement to a level that everyone is successful, because employees can be either the type that do their 8 and hit the gate, and that's all you get, or they can be the type that feel that the organization, that they're a part of the organization, they understand where they fit in, they understand where their particular contribution, their knowledge and their skill helps drive the success of an organization. Or you can just, like you said, have a leader that's my way or the highway, and then I can almost guarantee you that you're going to water down your employee engagement. And there's a financial impact to employee disengagement, and it's huge.
Big.
So it's very, very much worth your while to understand how to engage your employees. And I can see where being a compassionate leader, as you have explained to us today, is so beneficial and impactful and crucial.
Yeah.
It's crucial.
And that's
Definitely.
where coaching can also be very valuable, because it's helping, in addition to team coaching and helping teams learn how to communicate with each other, how to communicate with their managers, doing that same sort of coaching with the leadership team is incredibly important for them to understand how to show up in that compassionate way. We all have these skills to work on, and coaching can really help with that. And so it's incredibly valuable in that regard. And also, and I have seen this with my clients, it absolutely increases company loyalty of your customers. I'm sorry, of your employees. It definitely increases that loyalty and retention because they feel like you're investing in them and you care, right? You care even when maybe you'll make mistakes. We all do. Managers are going to make mistakes. You're going to show up in a way you didn't want to show up. But knowing that there's that coaching piece that you're investing in and investing in them in that way goes so far in helping those employees say, this is a company that cares about me and that I want to stay with. And I've seen that happen time and again with my clients.
Mm-hmm. And you may have had what we call maybe a Freudian slip just then when you said it increases customer. It does, because happy employees will deliver a service that makes customers happy.
So true.
That also is a known fact. When your employees are happy, they're going to be more engaged, of course, which translates to delivering a higher level of service, delivering a higher level of understanding. They increase their knowledge. They want more learning. They do better in training. And all that translates to a better experience for the customer. So you said it, but that's not what you intended to say at the moment. But that is what that's what it led to.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. You're right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So what do you think? Okay, so we've got the coach, we've got the compassionate coach. They've had these wonderful meetings and talks with the team where the team feels open to express themselves, and the coach has been able to help them understand that it's just us here. This is a confidential conversation. How can teams use what they discover in that coaching to improve the team dynamics and improve productivity?
Yeah, one of my favorite things is when we go in, and I'm sure you've done different personality assessments and those sorts of things. And I think whatever tool the company likes is great. So whatever tool you're a fan of, but getting some of that assessment work done that helps the individual in the team be able to express in a way that feels less personal. When you just try to say, well, I'm somebody who can be shy or whatever, sometimes it can be hard for people to express that. But when they have something like, here's the test I took and this is what it says about me, right? That they can show to people. That gives them this really sort of concrete way to express how they show up in the world, and for each other to see that and learn about that. Some of my favorite team coaching is being able to do that, to say, look, here's how Jane sees the world. And look, Bill, that's different than the way you see the world. And neither of those is right or wrong, but this is how you're each seeing the world. That kind of work and being able to get them where they're sharing a language, right, about how they see the world, helps them be able to start communicating in different ways that actually really honors the other person, instead of expecting them to say, well, this is how I show up. So for example, somebody who really likes a lot of context, I really want to understand how we got here. What were the decisions that we made in the past to get us to this point? If I don't understand all of the history behind this project, then I don't feel engaged. I feel a little bit at sea. I can't make a decision. There may be someone else for whom none of that matters. They just do not care two bits about how we got here. All that they care about is where we're going. I need to know, where are we headed? And my eye is on that ball. And those two people will have a very hard time understanding each other, communicating with each other, working on the same project, until they can understand why each shows up the way they do and why that matters to them. And then they can learn, okay, this doesn't matter to me, but I know it matters to her. So I'm going to give her that context, or give her space to explore that on her own, but make sure that that's being included. In the same way, that person can say, well, I know that they're more focused on where we're going. I'm still trying to figure this out, but I'm going to give them space to go ahead and start looking ahead, or let them be the one who takes the lead on the future focus piece, and I'll take the lead on the historic context, right? Understanding that allows you to each find as you talked about earlier, superpowers, find your superpower. And how do you plug that into the team dynamic? How do you plug that into any project? because we each show up differently, and those things are strengths. They are beautiful strengths. So how do I find what I bring to the table, and how can we make sure that any given project, rather than inviting workload up just by like, well, this is your job title or this is your seniority or whatever, this is the strength and the superpower you're bringing to the table and you're bringing to the table. How do we divide this project up in a way that allows us each to really play to our strengths? Because when we do, we get the best quality work and we get the most engaged people. When we just divide work up arbitrarily based on something else, job title, seniority, who got there first, those things do not deliver the best quality product, and they keep the employees feeling disengaged. So I think, to me, that's one of the most powerful things, is that being able to communicate with each other in a shared language and being able to really start thinking about how do we divide workload in a way that's going to have the best possible outcomes.
That's totally, it's like you're in my head right now, because as a certified facilitator of a personality profile, I do see that often, and I do totally understand we need to know the preferences and priorities and the communication styles and the work styles of the people on your team. You need to know, in the example that similar to the example you use, that Beverly likes a lot of detail. She wants to know all of this itty bitty little stuff. So when you give her information in the form of reports or however, PowerPoints or presentations, you need to give her, she's going to have questions, and you need to give her a lot of information. Whereas someone else just wants the overall view. They don't want all the nuts and bolts and they don't want all of that. That's like a waste of time, or that's information overload to them, or however, they perceive it. So if you don't deliver information to both those people in a way that their styles accepted, it's going to fail. It's just going to be a fail. And if you've got those people in the wrong positions and on the wrong projects requiring information or delivery of information that is contrary to how they work, it's going to fail. So yes, I'm in total alignment with you there, that if you want your team to be successful and you want people in the best places where they can then feel fulfilled and they can feel successful, you don't want to put them in jobs that's going to make them feel like they're failures, or, or they're going to struggle, or it's stressful. You want to put them in places that, those requirements come naturally for them. And as you mentioned, one of the best ways of doing that is the personality profiles.
Yeah. So I've also seen how it's really helpful for managers to understand that as well. Just something like a meeting for someone who is a verbal processor. Meetings feel great when we get to show up and let's brainstorm. So like a brainstorm session feels really great for those verbal processors. There are many people though who are not. And often a manager their management style is based on the way they show up. So if they're a verbal processor, they're going to have a lot of meetings where we brainstorm. If they're not, they aren't having those. And the people who do need that aren't getting it met. So understanding that, so that, for those verbal processors, we're going to have this space to be able to have those brainstorms. But then for those who are not, we're going to give them ahead of the meeting an agenda of what we're going to talk about and any necessary background information, so that they have time in advance of the meeting to prepare internally what they want to talk about. Because often meetings become problematic because someone shows up and starts talking not even fully formed ideas, and those kinds of folks dominate the room, and those people who needed more time to digest the information to be able to contribute feel like they can't contribute. And I have heard time and again in this team coaching that aspect coming up of people feeling like they don't appreciate my ideas because they go into these spaces and I'm not prepared and I don't feel comfortable the way they do to just throw out ideas. I need time to prepare. So knowing this stuff as a manager is part of what makes you a better leader and a more compassionate leader, because it's saying I care about all of my employees, even those who maybe don't show up in the same way I do. I want to make sure that they feel valued, because when you're not speaking to people in the way they show up, they're not feeling valued. I can assure you, you may not think that about your team right now, but if you're not doing this work to really understand the unique way each person's showing up, then you have team members right now who don't feel valued. And that's why coaching can be so helpful.
Absolutely. I have participated on teams where, just like you said, those brainstormers dominate. And I have had ideas, fully formed ideas that I was ready to present. By the way, an agenda is important for that, but it's also important to keep you on track. I'm not one of those people who like a lot of side conversations in the meeting. I feel like you should take those off, you should have those. And then there are some people who get in meetings and they want to talk about what's on their desk, what's on their calendar, what they're doing. And then that prompts someone else to then start talking about what they've got going on. And we don't get to the meat of the meeting. And a person like myself who wants to get to why we're really here, because if we're just here to chat, I've got real things on my desk that I need to be working on, but I've set aside this time to come into this meeting to talk about the things that you gave me on the agenda. So agendas are really important. And when people don't feel valued, unfortunately, I myself have been victim of such. I've often been in organizations where leaders saw my skill and my value and my potential, and they nurtured that and they fostered that. And I grew and got better. I was able to contribute to the organization's growth and success, felt really great about myself. Bam, ran into an organization that was none of that. It was like hitting a brick wall. I am typically very good about being confident in my ability and my skill. However, I ran into an organization that was contrary to all of what I'd experienced in the past. And I can tell you, I shrunk like a cheap t-shirt washed in hot water. I mean, my whole everything just shrunk, and they never got to experience the benefit of me. They never got to experience the fullness and the wholeness of me. And it was a loss for both of us. So the organization as well as myself, because I didn't grow and I wasn't able to contribute at the level that I could have. I did my job and everything, but I could have given so much more, had they worked to help align me and foster and nurture me. That the culture just didn't allow that. So
yeah, just think about that: wasted talent, wasted ideas, wasted potential. Yeah, that makes me sad, but I think it's such a great reinforcement of why it's so important, whether you bring in a coach or not. Although again, I really believe that it's really valuable. But yeah, I think that idea of compassion is so important.
Yeah. I'm going to remember your term, the compassionate coach. I don't know. Have you trademarked that? What do you do? You don't trademark it. You
would trademark it, but it's probably too late now. That's okay.
The compassionate coach. Yeah. It's been a great chat, Becky. I really learned a lot speaking with you. So, and I'm sure my listeners have as well. So tell us where we can reach you and if you have any specific offers that you'd like to present today.
Most of my work is delivering coaching services. I do one-on-one coaching and team coaching. You can learn more about me at my website, BeckyMollenkamp.com. Hopefully the spelling, I'm sure, will be somewhere in the show notes or the show title, but just find my name, or you can reach out on social. I'm Becky Mollenkamp everywhere, and we can have a conversation. I'd love to talk to you about how I can help your teams.
Awesome. Yes, all that information will be in the show notes, but I would just like to go ahead and spell your last name for our listeners, just in case for some reason they miss it or something. But it's Mollenkamp, Mollenkamp, Becky Mollenkamp. So yeah, it's been a really great chat. And I thank you so much for your time today and all the wonderful nuggets that you dropped. So leaders, let's try to get as compassionate as we can. And if you need help with that, get with Becky. I'm sure she's got time and some tips and the energy to help you get where you need to go. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed this conversation a lot.
Thank you, as did I, Becky. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Team Building Cultures. We hope we have delivered helpful and enlightening information to help you create your dream team. Join us next time